again. Here we are with the Economic Times Cutting Chai Conversations, and thank you so much for being here with us. As the meme floating around the internet often goes, people ask who is the leader, but many people don't ask the why of the leader, what goes into the making of the leader, the person behind the persona that takes center stage on the business pages or on the television, as it were. Uh, we have here with us in this entire series a set of business leaders who have blazed their own trail of success, done it in their own individualistic style, followed their passion, and of course, driven the company's bottom line magnificently as well. In this free flowing conversation and series, we have with us as our first guest Mr. Zuzar Tinwala, who's the COO of Standard Chartered Bank India. Mr. Tinwala, thank you so much for graciously agreeing to be a part of the series and being our first guest.
Yeah, thanks, Karan, for inviting me and letting me be the opening batsman. So, looking forward to this round of questions.
So, Mr. Tinwala, I'm a little bit curious. It's often said that our early lives were a little bit like human clay, where we are so easily molded and shaped by our experiences. What were the early experiences that really stick in your mind even now when you think about it?
See, I traditionally come from a very business-focused family, and we had our own factories at that time. Somewhere, it's generational. So, as the surname is a giveaway, we had tin factories, and we used to make containers out of tin.
Right.
So the general progression at that time, during those times, about 30 years back, is you take over your family business and move on. But my dad had a different view. He wanted both me and my brother to be independent of the business and first make our own careers. And then if we wanted to join the business, still that option was open. So he encouraged us to look for things outside the bank, outside the business area. So I looked at banking, and my brother looked at his more passion was medicine. So he's become a doctor and he's become a forensic psychiatrist in US, whereas I've become a successful banker. And let me just share something with you. I was initially, I started doing a banking job in '87 just after my graduation. For the first 6 months in a cooperative bank, I was just told to put rubber stamps. So it just frustrated me. I went back to my dad and I told him, no, I just want to come back to business. He says, too early, just give it a year more. And from then on, I said, I don't have an option. I have to spend a year, so might as well make, it's something useful. So I
Right.
started looking at each document which I was stamping and I started developing an interest. And from then onward, it was no looking back. Actually, I learned a lot even from that stamping exercise. And that initial phase of my career has taught me humility. So that's one thing which has helped me along the career a lot. And since I've begun from the ranks, I can understand and empathize with what happens at the ranks below. And I'm able to visualize their challenges and help them. So those initial experiences of life have taught me a lot, and I've become more self-independent. Another important thing, our father, always used to tell us that between money and knowledge, always chase knowledge because knowledge will take care of you. Whereas as far as money is concerned, you will be having to take care of it. So that's also deeply imbibed both in me and my brother, and that's helped us a lot during our journey.
That's very true because I often end up hearing a lot that you cannot chase money along your professional path. If you chase your passion, eventually the money chases you. It's often the case. So would you say that those your parents' support of you when you were looking to strike out on your own as a professional versus getting into a business? Do you think that really pushed you along to further your success, knowing that they had your back, that they're there as a safety net to always protect you and be there for you?
Knowing my father, I knew there was never a safety net, so that didn't give me a comfort. On the contrary, he was the kind who would always pull the rug below my legs just to
Really?
ensure
Wow.
that I still maintain my balance. And he
Wow.
did it for the
Okay.
right reason. So he never gave us that area of comfort. And being boys, you always, that at that time it was always, boys have to be tough. So he taught us all the things which he had learned the hard way. So we've imbibed a lot of things in terms of survival skill from him. So that, cushion was never behind our back.
Right. So it's a remarkably Western way of, parenting then, if you would, where you allow the baby duckling to just fly the coop after they get of a certain age. Whether they fly, they fly. If they crash land, they crash land. Was that it?
Absolutely. It's a matter of survival. How long will you hold your parents' hand? Yes, they will shape you, they will help you out in the initial stages of your life, but then you got to fend for yourself. They're not going to be everywhere with you.
So then, looking back over the years, over these 3 decades and some more, uh, what would you say are the major lessons, the major building blocks of success, the uh, main traits that stood you in good stead that you would draw upon even today?
See, two or three things which are always universal. One is, a positive bent of mind. And I love that, the catch from Nike, just do it. So
Yeah.
that's been always my, my morale, my motivational phrase, if you would say.
Uh-huh.
And between, aptitude, attitude, and altitude, there's a deep relationship. So I don't look for aptitude. I look for the right attitude in any person whom I'm recruiting, and that goes for
Right.
myself too. So if I have the right attitude, it will determine my altitude wherever and whatever I do it. So that's been, these are been my mantras in life, and I've always followed it. And it's universal. A lot of things keep changing, but if you get these two things right, that I can do anything, and I have to have the right attitude, it takes you a long way, and it will keep taking you a long way.
Right. It's like I was reading this article recently by Warren Buffett where they said the three things somebody needs to succeed with him. One is integrity, the other is knowledge, and the third is really energy or passion. And if you haven't got integrity, the other two really don't matter. That was his take on these three building blocks that really need to be there to succeed. But moving along, you were talking about just doing it, like Nike famously says. And I read that you're very passionate about driving, and as somebody who's equally passionate about the open road. I read that you hold the Limca National Record for the fastest South North four-wheeler expedition. How did that end up coming about?
See, the travel bug has always been in our family, right from my grandfather to my father. My father is 82. He still goes to Bali and does paragliding.
Wow,
So, so
that's
that's always
amazing.
been there, and we always loved traveling. So traveling was always a passion. I just combined that passion with road. So I used to, when during my early college days, take the motorcycle, go to Goa, Jaipur,
Mm.
Jaisalmer, and come back. So from then on, during my banking times, also when I was in the middle management and that career, I wanted to do something exciting outside banking. So I thought, what better than just mix the passion which I have for driving, along with a challenge, which was this, to break a record. And third, we also combined it with a CSR.
Right.
So we had a lot of my colleagues, my peers, my vendors had pledged a huge amount of 1 million INR.
Mm.
And if I would break that record. So that was another motivation for me. And we did break that record indeed by 10 hours, not by a few hours. And we managed to collect 1 million INR, which was used to restore 3,500 curable blindness
Hmm.
patients. So that's cataract patients, and
Right.
that's a pet project of the bank too. Seeing is believing, if you would have heard.
Yeah.
So we managed to restore 3,500 sites. So end to end, it was quite a motivational thing. I enjoyed doing it. We broke a record, and we did serve the community. So it ticked three boxes altogether.
So, what's occupying pride of place in your garage nowadays to make all those trips that you love making so much?
I've got an open 1978 Willys
Ooh,
Jeep.
very nice, very
It's a
nice.
four-wheel drive, and I've got my Merc, which anywhere is takes me between 1 to 100 in 4 seconds. So I've got a very, very, very old traditional pair of wheels as well as a very modern,
Which one is
up-to-date
that? The
vehicle.
C63?
No, M350.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Traveling in style, I see. Right. Do you find I found that in the pandemic, right? The pre-pandemic, I love traveling as well, but more often than not, I ended up taking a flight and then driving down from point A to point B, say from north to south within whatever country. But post-pandemic, do you find that the number of road trips that you are doing has gone up, or has that still been a consistent number?
Actually, the road trips have completely reduced post-pandemic because it doesn't make sense. We got to be responsible citizen. We
Yeah,
may be fit, but we do interact during a normal course with senior citizens, with children. So we owe it to them to take care of our own health so that we don't jeopardize other people's health. That said and done, I've got a farmhouse which is about 80, 90 kilometers away from Mumbai. And most of the time of this pandemic, I've spent there in the jungles with my dogs,
very nice.
completely isolated place. So no human contact much and natural social distancing.
Lovely, lovely, as the case should be. You Over the course of this year, one of my personal pet peeves has been that I love, even pre-pandemic, maintaining a bit of a work-life balance. When I'm on, and when I switch off, I just completely switch off. But that entire boundary has been blurred big time by the pandemic, with people mixing personal and professional lives a whole lot. Do you find that to also be a commonality, or have you been able to maintain that divide?
It started earlier. It did start earlier where people would start sending meeting invites from 7 in the morning to 8 at night, wondering that I'm not traveling anywhere, so might as well I'm free to take those calls. So,
Precisely,
but
precisely.
it started for a month, 2 months, and then I called my team also, and we all decided that beyond 6 o'clock in the evening and before 9 o'clock in the morning, we won't set up any calls. And even if we get meeting calls or invites, we'll refuse as a practice. We started doing it initially, and we noticed after a month people stopped sending us invites. So we
Right.
maintain that balance. And many a times there are certain things which are important, and you may have to stretch a bit.
True.
What I
True.
do is, in between the call, I either take my dogs out for a walk, I just go for a cycling ride, I come back. So I tend to, rather than doing it early morning or late evening, I try to take those breaks in between, or just talk to my son. We just share a few things. Probably he's big enough to have a beer with me, so we sit and have beer in the evening together. But that's how on the contrary, we were just sitting and talking about 2 weeks back, and I got a compliment from him that after pandemic I've seen more of you in the house I've never seen in 30 years of your career.
It's a
So
good
for me,
thing.
I don't know. For me, it's probably worked out better. I've been able to be as effective as I was earlier in work. At the same time, I've got enough family time with my family. So in a way, it's worked out well. And
Yeah.
yeah, so no regrets about that.
That's a definite
And another
upside though. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Go on,
another
please.
thing, Karan, as I always have believed that work-life balance and work and personal life balance. If you enjoy doing your work, that line will
Mhm.
always be blurred. You should be passionate. So I'm not saying you've got to work 18 hours, 19 hours, but whatever you're doing, if you enjoy, you don't mind.
Hmm.
It shouldn't become a drag on you or somebody forcing you to do that
True.
job. So if you love what you're doing anyway, doesn't matter much.
No, my point was more about the whole. I think it's a Indian versus maybe a Western way of seeing things, where you're just made to work long hours, even if you don't need to work that long. You're supposed to be showing that you're a hard worker.
Good you brought that up. The message I give to my team is if you're working longer, you're inefficient.
Yeah.
If your colleagues can do the work and go home early and you're still working, either your AC at home doesn't work or you're inefficient. One of the two things.
Yeah, yeah, there is
So
that.
and believe me, it all starts from you as you need to lead from example. If you walk out at 6 o'clock, there's nobody for your colleagues to show that they're sitting and working. The boss
Right.
walks out, people start packing up and walking. If I'm sitting till 8, people would definitely, at least a few people would sit to show that, camaraderie, or they're saying, no, we're working equally hard. It all starts with us. We got to set an example.
Mr. Tinwala, this whole year has been one bit of a crazy roller coaster ride. I, for one, and I'm sure millions of others can't wait to get off of it. But what have been your biggest learnings or your biggest takeaways from this year?
You're absolutely right. Pandemic has brought its own challenges. There were heartburns. We have lost a few people who were very close to us, all of us. That's been the saddest part of it, and we've
Right.
got a lot of, even within the organization, we've had a few of our colleagues whom we've lost, young guys. That's been the painful part of it, and it'll take some time for us to recover as a team. But looking every challenge has got some positives with it. So come the advent of pandemic, we've all learned how to work from home. I've been a professional in operations and technology for the last 32 years, and I was a firm belief that operations can't be done from home. It's
Hmm.
quite people intensive. You need to speak to your clients, there are documents you need to do work with. But come pandemic, within a day or two, that whole theory of mine just collapsed. And I'm
Right.
happy it did collapse, because, and I was myself surprised that 99% of our workforce was operating from home and as efficient, if not more, as before. So
Very
that's
true.
one thing. That's one positive thing which has come out in terms of how we can have a diverse, you know, mobile workforce operating from any part or nook in the country. And some of my colleagues who are not Bombay based have actually gone back to their locations and are
Yes.
contributing from them. And the positive news which I get from them is the parents are in the first 5, 10 years, first time I've seen, and they've spent so much time at home. So,
Yeah.
and at the same time contributing. So
Yeah.
that's one positive which has come out. It has also taught us to be flexible. It's taught us to be flexible in a big way. Because if we are not flexible, we will not be able to survive, and we'll have to be quick and agile on our feet to find solutions in the fast changing world. And it
Mm-hmm.
didn't give us time. It didn't give us time to prepare too. It was just
True.
March, mid of March or end of March overnight, the Prime Minister announced a lockdown. And from then on, there was no workbook, there was no playbook which people could
Right.
follow. And everybody had to find their own way out through the maze, and find it we did. So we did continue with, and our volumes have again come back, banking volumes have again come back to normal. And the same way of working is continuing. So people have got used to it. And another good part which we see is there was a huge uptake in the digitization in banking too, just like in other industries.
Yes.
So a lot of people now who would have earlier walked into a branch have got used to in the last 6 months to do their transactions online. And that's been a big help to them too, because an online service is disinterrupted, it's quick. At the same time, people get their responses in a matter of seconds. So that's helped the bank a lot. And it's also brought a lot of customer satisfaction. Uh, we as an organization also were very agile. We changed our policies, processes to meet our customer requirements. And as a
Right.
result of which, post COVID, we did a survey, and all our customers found us to be the most agile bank in terms of responding to the crisis and to their requirements. So that turned out well. So a lot of these positives came out, which taught us to be agile and respond to things which we were thought were impossible earlier to achieve.
So, you mentioned earlier, Mr. Tinwala, that you're staying at your farmhouse some 90, 100 kilometers from Bombay. Weather must be fantastic over there, I imagine, because it's even cool over here in Bombay in the evenings. I can only imagine how much cooler and nicer it is out there.
Just like life, weather has also got its own phases, guys. I've been here through 44 degrees, 45 degrees in
Ooh,
summer. So it's equally hot at that time. Then came the monsoon and now the winter. So it's got about 18, 19 degrees. So I'm enjoying
lovely,
right
lovely,
now for
lovely,
the next
lovely.
2, 3 months. But I've gone through the pain of the summer months too here.
So I even heard that you're a big wildlife buff as well. You've had your own up close personal experiences. Did that whole love for animals and for exploring flora, fauna bite you from a young age, or when did that really kick off?
It started somewhere post my college, and I went for once. Some guys were just going for a tiger safari, and I didn't know what it was. So we went once to Bandhavgarh first, and then we went in an open jeep in the forest. That time the whole tiger adventure had not safari adventure had not picked up to the extent it has picked up now. Talking about 20 years back,
Hmm.
2 3 jeeps used to go in the forest, and we used to go in an open jeep, and the guys used to tell us, see, this is the pug mark of the tiger. See, this is the call of the tiger. See, this is the monkeys calling. And we used to come out on the jeep without seeing the tiger. And I said, this is all a bloody rubbish. It doesn't work that way. But then on the first trip, I went for 4 rides. I didn't see a single tiger. So I came out with the belief that I don't want to ever go into this because there are no tigers. And even if they are there, you'll never see them. Somehow I managed to convince myself to go to Ranthambore for the next trip. And the very first safari, I sighted 4 tigers, and everything they said about calling, pug marks, and all was true. And from that onwards, from the first sighting of the tiger till now, it was no looking back. I've covered all the national parks which is in India, and also I've traveled to overseas to Africa, to Alaska, and other places where I've visited the wildlife parks and sanctuaries out there. But
Lovely.
my fascination has always been tiger, because it's such an alert beast. It's such a royal beast. It's always on his toe. It's always guarding his territory. So it drives a lot of inspiration. And unlike a lot of people say tiger is ferocious, I've personally had experience with a tiger where it doesn't attack you without a reason. And I mean, it gives you enough signals versus bang the tails. It gives you a snow growl. It does a mock charge. And still, if you don't follow all these, then it gives you an attack. So you got enough opportunity, unlike at times people behave. The tiger gives you enough opportunity to, just stay away or move
Right.
back. And I would like to share one experience of mine that was in summer of 2017, and I was in Ranthambore. Ranthambore had become my famous place, and I used to go 5 times in a year there for
Oof.
3 days. So I went once. I was there. I had taken a whole jeep. I was lying down on the jeep, and we were following a tigress. And 8 kilometers. Mine was the only jeep because we had gone into the remote part of the forest, and we've got that tigress there. She was
Okay.
walking on the road. We were walking ahead. She used to come closer to the jeep. We used to move ahead. And all of a sudden, a turn came. I was lying flat and I was just looking at the tigress from my lens of the camera. And she just
Mm.
kept walking, and my driver didn't see her coming because of the turn. She just came 3 feet short of my lens and stood
Wow.
there. And I was just so busy clicking photographs, I didn't even realize he's so close. And the last picture I clicked, I just got two eyes of the tigress there. And then my guy realized that he's too close and he just sped in the front. But the whole thing, she was not snarling, she was not growling, she just stood there patiently looking into my lens and waiting for me to move ahead. So that's something which is always a fond memory, and I don't think so anybody will ever come so close to a wild tiger in its natural habitat.
So, given that you've traveled extensively around the country, even overseas, to check out all these national parks and to check out wildlife, I'm sure that over the years you would have seen, to some extent, however large, the environmental impact that humankind has had in this whole human nature balance, where things are now getting to this tipping point, if you would. What's your take on all these environmental issues that we have?
See, if I talk, somewhere far off, let's take Mumbai. Mumbai, we've got the Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Do you know it's the only sanctuary in the world which is between cities? That's Thane
Yeah,
and Mumbai. So it's the only national park. And from my childhood days, I used to love that place. We used to go cycling there. And it used to be a whole green cover area with forest expanding right up to Jogeshwari and up to Andheri.
yeah.
If you now travel through that road, you can itself see the kind of damage we've done to that whole area. And there are 40 odd leopards still left there, and we've encroached upon their territory. So they either come out in Viviana Mall in Thane, or they come out in some complex at IIT Powai or in some
Yeah,
buildings
yeah,
at
yeah.
Borivali. So that itself just shows the extent of damage and encroachment we've done onto the only green piece of cover which Bombay had, and it was the only sanctuary still in the world which is between two cities. And just like these, there are stories all across the country.
Hmm.
But of late, with so much focus on tiger, and there's a very strong saying in the wildlife area which you say, save the tiger, save the forest. So when you focus on saving the tiger, you automatically save the flora and fauna around us. And it's heartening to see in the last census, after a long, long, long time, our numbers of tigers grew from 1411 to something 15626, I think, if I'm not wrong. That's a very positive sign that we are doing the right, we're taking the baby steps, we're taking the right thing to do to protect our forest and flora and fauna. And thereby, the size of the tigers or the population of tigers is growing. So that's something which is heartening, but there's lots more to do, lots more to do. And if we don't do that, I don't think so. You can see the kind of damage the global warming is doing. Summer
Yeah.
is becoming more warmer, winter is becoming more colder. So we got to act, and we got to act fast to protect and preserve.
Yeah, because even recently, when you're talking about the Mumbai Metro as an example, we were so willing to just tear down one of the green lungs of the city in the RA forest just so you could have one shed over there. I hear that they put the brakes on that, but I have no idea whether it's going to hold or not. That's just completely a different discussion for a different day. It's slightly depressing, actually, if you think about it, just how much it's going to impact probably not my generation, but the one after mine, and even us in the
Karan, I
same
would,
age.
yeah. I'll also tell you two or three other interesting things. That's one side of where we've encroached on the forest. But another side, be it Sariska, be it Pench, or be it Ranthambore, we've vacated village along with the forest officials there and the NGOs. And believe me, you have 2 years after vacating the forest, you don't even realize a village did exist. Forest completely takes over. Completely takes over. You just find some stone walls or some small pebbles somewhere. You'll find, no, this was, a veranda of some house. Otherwise, it's completely green cover. So, with the speed that we destroy, as the same speed which the environment takes over once we just leave, give it an
True,
opportunity to do that.
true. Nature finds a way, as they say.
Absolutely.
So, are you an avid reader, Mr. Tinwala?
I'm not an avid reader. I like to see more serials, and I like to look at more crime series and more into criminology and others. But I do read once in a while. So you know,
So what's
it's
on
not that I
your
don't.
watch list nowadays, Mr. Tinwala, if I may ask?
I keep looking at serials like Criminal Minds and others. So one gets over, the whole genre comes in front of me, and that's the type of serial which I keep looking at. Unbelievable Sinner. These are all on Netflix. Broadchurch, some of the good ones, which I would surely recommend.
My wife is actually big time into horror, into mystery, into thrillers. And at one time, she was binging on this series called How to Murder Somebody and Get Away with It. And she saw all 5 seasons
How
of
to
it back
commit
to
a
back.
murder. You're right.
Yeah, so I essentially made sure that I upped my security. I had my will written out, and I had my social distancing done from her for at least a couple of days until she completely ran through all of those episodes. So yeah,
Yes,
that's
it won't help you, my friend. Just be good to her. That will help you more.
true, true, true. Mr. Tinwara, thank you so much for being here with us. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you. That rounds up the first episode of the Economic Times Cutting Chai Conversations here with us. And we hope that you're there with us over the course of the many, many episodes that we hope to churn out and bring to you and entertain you with over a cup of cutting chai or coffee, if you would. We're not judging you if you choose to go either way. So thank you so much for being here with us. It's me, Karan Karai, signing off for the Economic Times.